Wondering what the F has happened to your body and your life? You're in the right place, my friend. Welcome to Season 3 of Transforming 45, where we dive into the incredible stories of how brilliant humans are navigating the midlife squeeze with courage, passion, and a healthy dose of humor. Don't miss out on any of our heart-led episodes. Hit the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and if you're inspired, share an episode you love with a friend. It means more to me than I can express that you're choosing to spend time here and sharing our message of midlife revolution. So let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. I am honored this week to have Jennie Dale. She is the Executive Director of Dense Breast Canada, DBC. She volunteers full-time for DBC. She lives in Ontario. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2014, and in 2016, Jennie was introduced to Michelle Di Tommaso. They both felt strongly that it was wrong to withhold potentially life-saving information about breast density from women. They founded DBC, and they learned about additional injustices and inequities in breast cancer screening in Canada. The goals and mission expanded. DBC raises awareness and advocates for optimal breast cancer screening. Jennie teamed up with breast cancer survivors and experts nationwide to advocate for optimal breast screening for all Canadians. And together, they have advocated successfully for almost 20 changes in breast screening practices in provinces and territories. Jennie, thank you so much for being here today. We were just briefly chatting before we started, and I said to you how this is essential information for the community in Transforming 45. It is essential information for Canadian women. And selfishly, I have all kinds of questions of my own. So I am so deeply grateful for you being here today. Thank you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for having me.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning, and that is with you. So who are you, and how did life introduce you to this version?
Okay, well, I guess first I'd have to say I'm a mom of 4 adult children, but right now they probably say that I am an obsessed woman who spends all her time working on breast cancer screening. That's all they hear about. How did I get to this point? Well, like you, I faced a transition in my life. I had my youngest leaving the nest, getting married, getting out, and I had been home. I had been fortunate to be a stay-at-home mom for many, many years, and I had a special needs child. And then all of a sudden, the house was empty, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do because I had been out of the workforce for such a long time, and I was a little bit lost. And I met a wonderful group of women. We decided to start a learning group, that does lectures for, for seniors kind of thing. And that was really exciting for me to get involved in something. But at the same time, I began to read about something called dense breast. So I had been diagnosed with breast cancer in 2014. I had a sister who had breast cancer 5 years prior. I was going annually. I had the occasional callback, the occasional follow-up, and my doctor had given me a requisition for my regular mammogram and also a screening ultrasound. And I had mammogram and everything appeared to be fine. They sent me back to the waiting room to wait for my ultrasound. And my sister happened to be in the waiting room at the same time waiting for another test. So it was kind of, I don't know, premonition or something there. Anyway, go into the ultrasound, and within a few minutes, the tech says to me, I'm going to go get the radiologist. And that moment I will never, ever forget, because it's the before and after moment. If she's going to get the radiologist, she has seen something. And it was totally like, what? Like totally unexpected. I sat up. I just remember being in that dark room. I remember her coming in. I remember her, taking a look herself. And then the radiologist says to me, I'm going to call your doctor. And I really think that you should get to the breast clinic. So right then and there, she didn't have to say more. Right then and there, I knew I had breast cancer. It was a Friday afternoon. It was 3 o'clock. She's calling my doctor. Okay, there's a problem here.
Hmm.
But she made it maybe a little bit less serious than she thought it was when she spoke to my doctor, because then I called my doctor and spoke to her right after, and she said, well, she doesn't know, blah blah. But the radiologist had said to me I could pick up my report on Monday. So when I picked up my report, there in my report it said basically this is cancer. It had all the markings of cancer, she could tell. And so I had to wait still for a biopsy for confirmation, and then the pathology. So that was weeks of hell. Um, it was the worst period of my life ever. And so that whole experience, makes me able to relate, in my work now to anyone who is diagnosed with breast cancer. But a couple of years after that, being in this period of being lost and transition and what to do, the third age learning group was great, but it wasn't all of my passion. And I read about something called dense breasts, and I hadn't known about dense breasts. And I had always been like a health information junkie. I used to have file folders and file folders before the internet of, all different conditions and things like that. I was very interested in health, reading everything I could. And then I didn't know about this. And then I started to read about it. And it's like, what is this? And is this why my cancer was missed on my mammogram? And I had no idea if I had dense breasts or not. And then I started to do a little bit of digging, and I realized that nobody in Canada knew their breast density. And I started to read that this has been a known risk factor for decades. Since the 70s, it has been known that having dense breasts is a risk. But I didn't know, and I felt like, wait, if I don't know, then most likely most people don't know. And I always have this thing where if I learn something, I want everybody to know it. And so I started to like write out this thing for my friends. And As I was doing that, I just began to get very angry that this risk factor was not being told to women. And it just fired up something in me. And it was like, that was it. It was like I was bitten by a bug. It was almost like, okay, it was really, you could say I found my calling, because it just grabbed me and did not let go. And so I contacted a woman in the US who was doing the advocacy in the US. Her name is Nancy Capello. And she had been contacted by a woman in Vancouver, Michelle DiTomaso, and she said, "Let me introduce you to her. I'm not doing anything, Canada, but maybe you can talk to Michelle and figure something out." So contacted Michelle, and we clicked like immediately. It was like it was meant to be. We both were so angry at the same level of angry. She was considerably younger than I was. She had young kids. She was diagnosed. She was told that she had had breast cancer for years that had been missed on her mammogram. She went through hell with her treatment, her chemo. I was very fortunate. My cancer was found early. I didn't need chemo. I had a lumpectomy. I then chose to have a mastectomy. I avoided radiation. So, but she went through the full treatment, aggressive treatment. She almost died. She was hospitalized. She was very passionate. And so we decided to join forces. And then Nancy also introduced us to a gentleman, Jamie Eichenberger, who had lost his partner. And the three of us just spent hours, talking about what we were going to do about this. Were we going to start a group? Were we going to start a nonprofit? What were we going to do? How were we going to get the information out? And I spent about 6 months then learning everything I could about dense breast. Nancy also introduced me to the guru in Canada, the breast cancer screening expert who has been leading the charge on getting additional screening for women with dense breast, Dr. Paula Gordon. And, from the moment I spoke to Dr. Gordon, we also clicked, and we've been working together for the past 8 years. So been very fortunate to work with wonderful people. Of course, the group has expanded over the years, but that's how my story started with breast cancer and dense breast Canada.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's really powerful, and there are a number of things that I want to pull the threads there. And the first one um, is thank you for saying that you felt lost in the transition. I think And I can speak from my own experience. When we go through these transitions and we make big shifts in our lives, there's this expectation of like, well, if you're going to make this transition, you better know how it's going to turn out, and you better know what the steps are along the way. And I'm a couple of years into my transition now, and I, like you, when I started learning about perimenopause and menopause and realizing what we absolutely don't know about our bodies, it was the anger around that that fueled my desire for revolution, right? For making change. And so also thank you for welcoming that emotion, because again, there's a lot of story around like, well, we shouldn't be angry. Like, let's not be angry. But anger can absolutely be the fire that is creative, right? That creates really positive change.
Yes, I guess it has been anger and justice that has fueled me, but it's also something I wish I could control a bit better because I have not been sleeping properly for all these years. It keeps me up at night because there's so much, as I got into the breast cancer screening world, what I began to learn. It's an ugly place. And there is so much information being withheld from women, and there is so much more that we can do to save lives. And so learning all that and wanting to get it out, how do I get it out and how do I stop this? It has been, transformational for me, not necessarily the most healthy way though. So, anger, I could probably use some, help with balance.
Yes.
And so I was, thrilled to have found something that I was passionate about, and I'm no longer, I was no longer lost once I found this, and it was having purpose, and it made all the difference for me. But balance, I have not exactly been able to strike, in terms of, my priorities, and this became my priority, and it's often to the detriment of family relationships. And it's not like everybody can understand once you have that, almost like, once you're so passionate about something and it just takes over your life, it's not something necessarily people can understand, especially not when it's about breast cancer screening, where there's so much misinformation and lack of education.
Yeah. And it's that, again, thank you for being so honest, because it's really important to talk about both sides of that coin, right? Like, that passion is so key for making change. Right? That's how we know, it's the catalyst. And yet for change to be sustainable, we need to do it in a way that is supportive of the change maker also. And I think, when you're talking about people not understanding, like I can imagine people hearing, well, breast screening, like, but what's underneath that is so deep, because you are looking at women's health through breast density and screening. I am looking at it through perimenopause and menopause. But at the bottom, all of those advocacy pieces are deeply connected in not valuing women and women's health.
Exactly. It is very connected, every aspect of it. And we work with specialists in cervical cancer screening, postpartum depression, like every aspect of women's health has been neglected. Women are frequently gaslighted, dismissed. We come across this all the time. And so, yes, this whole area of women's health is very connected. And, once we get breast cancer screening done, I'd love to help with the other areas.
Yeah. Well, and there's a really direct connection between breast cancer and menopause and perimenopause, in that in the menopause hormone therapy. The number one question I get always is, well, if I take this, will I get breast cancer? And while we are not fortune tellers, we can't guarantee anything, but we also know that the overwhelming evidence from study after study after study after over decades has shown very clearly that menopause hormone therapy does not lead directly to breast cancer. And so making sure that people hear that message, but we need to say it over and over and over again, because there is such a wealth of story, and it's really hard to put that genie back in the bottle.
Absolutely. We have the same thing with breast cancer screening. There are so many myths around it. People, are fearful of the radiation, and so they won't get screened because they think the radiation will cause cancer. Well, not having your mammogram because you're afraid of radiation is not a winning bet. The radiation is just slightly higher than a chest x-ray. If your doctor recommended a chest x-ray, would you say, no, I'm not going because of the radiation? And so the thing about breast cancer, though, is something you don't hear the same thing about pap tests. You don't hear there's a concerted effort to keep women from breast cancer screening. There's not the same effort to keep them from their pap tests
Uh-huh.
or, colon screening, or lung screening. There's something very specific about breast screening. It's just filled with controversy and misinformation. And I'm hoping we'll be able to dispel some of that today.
Yeah. So let's start right at the most basic level of information. So what does it mean to have dense breasts?
Well, dense breasts are common and they're normal, and 43% of the population has dense breasts. And it simply means that our breasts are everyone's breasts, they're unique, but they're made up of fat and fibrous tissue and glandular tissue. And the fibrous tissue is like connective tissue, it holds the glandular, that's the ducts and the milk glands in place. And so if you have more glandular and fibrous tissue than fat in your breast, you have dense breasts. So that's what dense breasts are. But the issue is that you need to know and then you need to understand what the implications of having dense breasts are, because dense breasts pose two risks. And the first risk, and these are two separate independent risks. And when I first started DBC, I didn't fully understand that these were two separate risks. And one is that it increases your risk of breast cancer if you are in the highest category, extremely dense breasts. Like there's a continuum. There's four categories: A, B, C, D for breast density. A are fatty breasts, and then it progressively gets more and more dense. So category D is the highest. That's extremely dense. If you have extremely dense breasts, you're 4 to 6 times more at risk than having breast cancer than a woman with fatty breast, category A. So the risk increases as the density increases, but that's not the main risk of having dense breasts. The main risk is the masking effect. And that means that on a mammogram, that's an x-ray, fat will show up as black and you can spot a cancer. A cancer shows up as white. So it's like a star in the sky. The radiologist can easily see, oh, there's cancer. But when you have dense breasts, that tissue is white on the mammogram. Cancer is white.
Mm.
So there's a masking effect. It's very difficult for a radiologist to see cancer in dense breasts. Now they do see it, but sometimes they cannot see it. And that is an imperfection with our current screening. But we have this belief that mammograms are perfect. You have trust in the system that you're going for a mammogram. You come out all clear. Well, if you have dense breasts, that all clear may not be all clear. So what then happens is you have a higher risk of finding a cancer in between your screenings. You may feel a lump. You may be doing self-exam, or you may be washing yourself in the shower and you may feel a lump. So women with dense breasts have a higher chance of having that in-between cancer. It's called interval cancer. And those cancers, unfortunately, are more aggressive. They're more likely to have spread, they're later stage. And so we want to avoid that. We don't want women to have a false sense of security. We want them to know their density and understand there are these implications of it. And therefore, you can take steps. You can be proactive about your health. So withholding this information is what we faced when we started DBC. No one was being told if they had dense breasts or not. Now across the country, after all this time, we went province by province, we got policy change, and we have women being told if they have dense breasts or not. They get the letter, they get a pamphlet in the mail now, and in their mammogram result letter that comes to them after their mammogram, they're told if they have category A, B, C, D, and what that means.
That is a really powerful change because I am 47 years old, almost 48, and I had not heard the term dense breast
It's a mouthful.
until last year when I was listening to Glennon Doyle's podcast, We Can Do Hard
Hmm.
Things, and her
Yes.
sister, her sister's journey. That was the first time I had ever heard that term. And So, what are some of the reasons why that hasn't been brought forward until now?
Why there's been this withholding of information? I think there's a lot of paternalism involved here. One of the reasons we were told is that if you tell women they have dense breasts, they will become anxious. And that is still the reason in Quebec. In Quebec, it's one of the two provinces that doesn't put the information in the letter that gets mailed to women. It puts it on their online portal. And it doesn't give it gives a letter. It doesn't give an explanation because we don't want to make women anxious. Okay. In all these years, I have never had a woman, show their anxiety. It's not like, oh, we're going to need an Ativan if you tell us that we have dense breasts.
Uh-huh.
Women can look after their own health if you give them a chance. If you give them the information, give them a chance to be proactive. So that's number one reason. The other reason is that I've just explained that a mammogram is not enough. Therefore, additional screening is needed. That increases the cost.
Right.
So we always come back to money.
Uh-huh.
And so that means an ultrasound or an MRI, that means more stress on the system. Let's avoid it all. Let's not tell women, then they won't ask for anything more, they won't bother us. Let's just let it go. So I think those are the two main reasons. And yeah, there's another reason. Our Canadian guidelines don't recommend additional screening for women with dense breasts. Doctors are not taught about dense breasts in medical school. They get just a few hours of training about breast cancer, and they don't know about it. I mean, every time I would see my oncologist, we would talk about dense breasts. He would have a fellow or in the office, and I'd start the whole spiel again, educating them about dense breasts. Women are constantly, I'm going to use the term gaslighting a lot because they go in, they're learning about dense breasts, and they want to talk to their doctor about it. And the doctor says, it's nothing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. It's
So,
Yeah, the frustration around, I mean, we now know women's bodies weren't even included in medical studies and research until 1993, right? So there is no way that anyone really understands the complexities of what's happening with a woman's body at this point in time. And for me, the frustration lies in when people feel like they have the answer and that what they know is like, well, this is the final answer because this is what I learned and this is what I know. And it's just not the case. There is so much research that is starting, that is, just beginning to really understand about what is happening in a woman's body. Is there any way to know if you have dense breasts without having a mammogram?
no. And that's another thing. Doctors are continuously telling women that they have dense breasts. A woman will come in and she may have, something suspicious, not sure what it is. And the doctor will say, oh, that's just dense breasts, dense tissue. You can't feel it. You cannot tell if you have dense breasts by look, by feel. And so many women have said to me over the years, I have dense breasts. And I said, well, how did you find, when did you first find out? Oh, my doctor did an exam and said I had dense breasts. No, no, no. You cannot tell unless you have a mammogram. That is the only way to find out. And unfortunately, only maybe 50 to 60% of the population in Canada is having a mammogram. And so there are a lot of women out there who are not getting screened and not finding out that they are at increased risk because they have dense breasts. So that's why it's super important to start screening at 40.
Okay. So the last time, and I love my doctor, she's very supportive, but the last time I saw her, she said that I didn't have to start screening until I was 50. So this is all really key and important information. And I have just assumed that I do have dense breasts because if too much information for everybody out there, perhaps, but I have very small breasts. I don't have the tissue that that allowed me to create breast milk. So I have just sort of assumed, well, that must mean that I have dense breasts. But it's impossible to tell from what I'm hearing you say. It's impossible to tell unless you have a mammogram.
Yes. And I do want to continue talking about dense breasts, but I hope we can get to this subject of your doctor telling you don't need to start till 50 because that is life threatening.
Okay.
So, but with dense breasts, I just want to also add that there is also a concerted attempt to keep women from getting the additional screening they need if they have dense breasts. Very few provinces are offering that additional screening, and women have to insist and persist. In Ontario, you can get it if you're a category C or D. Category D, you can get MRI. You can ask for MRI or ultrasound, and that will depend on capacity. It's difficult with hospitals today to get that additional screening because of the lack of technologists. They're backlogged. But if you can get a requisition, then you can go to a community clinic. And women with dense breasts need to be very vigilant, need to be breast aware, need to perform self-exam, have a normal mammogram. 2 weeks later, you may see something, feel something, think, oh, I just had a normal mammogram. This is nothing. No, no. You see something different, you have to speak up. And then once you get to your doctor's office, you cannot have your doctor say to you, you just had a normal mammogram. This is nothing. No, no, you must insist on additional imaging. So that's not screening anymore, that's diagnostic. But for screening, we are fighting across this country for women to get the essential screening that they need because they are being denied. And too many women are dying or they're suffering needlessly. When you miss a cancer on a mammogram, it doesn't disappear, it keeps growing and growing. Okay. And the stage keeps increasing. And our best chance for breast cancer right now is to find it early. So the stage is really so significant. Finding a tumor small means a better chance of survival. It means a better chance at avoiding chemotherapy, mastectomy, lymphedema, all the financial repercussions, all the burden that goes along with the cancer diagnosis. If you find it early, much of that can be reduced. So if you have dense breasts, you don't let anyone negate that. Please, like, just know your risk, understand your risk, do that self-exam, get that additional screening. And some provinces, though, you can't, so you may consider traveling to a province where you can.
Okay. So let's roll back a little bit to, so now women are able to self-refer. So can you talk about the
In Ontario,
regulations around
yes.
that?
So this is something new in Ontario. And in Canada, for 30 years, we only had 4 jurisdictions that allowed self-referral at 40. Then it was a lot of advocacy, and we were putting a lot of pressure on, in addition to working with other groups, putting pressure on. And finally, the Canadian Cancer Society joined in that advocacy. And we began to see all the provinces begin to commit or and implement self-referral at 40, meaning you no longer need a requisition. So if you don't have a family doctor, it's not an issue. You don't have to face your family doctor and ask for a requisition, face that pushback as you have faced. You can just pick up the phone, call 1-800-668-9304 in Ontario and book that mammogram. And so it is life changing. There's 17% of women in the 40s that get breast cancer. It is more aggressive in the 40s because of the ovarian hormones. And so it is, as most the deaths from breast cancer that happen are, women in the 40s. It's a time you're raising families, you're looking after aging parents. You are not expendable. You are not acceptable losses. You are vital to our country, to your family. And you have to just take a few minutes for yourself and get this test. And there's all this, misconception how painful this test is. And for most women, it is not painful at all. It is compression of the breasts for a total of 10 seconds for each picture. Women who have given childbirth many times, who have gone through that, in my opinion, I think they can take 10 seconds times 4 to get a mammogram. Now, I'm not going to negate that some women, maybe small chest, there may be discomfort. So it's recommended you take a Tylenol or Motrin beforehand. You don't go around your period. You go maybe 5 days. You schedule 5 days after your period so you're not as sensitive. And you tell yourself this is really important for your health. There's no other test we have right now. Nothing. You cannot go straight to an ultrasound. So you have to go through the mammogram. And it literally can save your life because a mammogram can detect cancer 2 to 3 years before you can feel it. Once you feel that lump in the shower, or once you see a symptom, there's many symptoms. There's, we'll get, potentially get into that. But
Huh.
once you see something that's not your normal, then you're usually past stage one already. You're usually potentially facing chemo. So if you get a mammogram, you can find it much smaller.
Okay.
So
I just want to
get your
reiterate.
mammogram. I'm not getting off
Yes.
until you book that
Get your
mammogram.
mammograms. Just want to say, I just want to reiterate what you said because I think that's really powerful that a mammogram can see something 2 to 3 years prior to you being able to feel it. So when you think about the damage that is done in those 2 to 3 years, getting that mammogram early is so essential to your long-term health and well-being.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention there are potential limitations. I mentioned the limitations of the mammogram, but there is a potential for a recall. And so that's another anxiety producing situation. Mammograms can see things that are not cancer. The radiologist can see a cyst, can see a fibroadenoma, maybe overlapping tissue. They're not sure what it is. If they're not 98% sure this mammogram is fine, then they may be ordering additional tests for you. So there may be a wait for an additional test. There may be another mammogram, a 3D mammogram, or there may be an ultrasound. And so that is anxiety provoking. But once that test is done and you are deemed fine, that anxiety disappears. It's transient. But critics of mammograms use that as a major harm. And everyone I've spoken to has said, I'd rather be, safe than sorry. I'd rather go through that transient anxiety, get that extra testing, make sure I don't have cancer, than to find out I have a later stage of cancer. And the critics, they don't understand that. And so they call it false positives. There's no such thing. It's really a recall for extra images. But women need to be aware that that is a possibility that can happen, especially for your first mammogram. There's a much higher percentage if you're going, especially in your 40s, where you have more women in their 40s have dense tissue, harder to see, much higher chance of having a recall. Just get through that. Doesn't mean you're going to have recalls every time. So more likely, the first time. And then after that, there's, anywhere from a 7 to 9% chance of having a recall after that.
Okay.
So it's important to be aware of that.
Yeah, very. And I think it's really important. Thank you for bringing up the 40s as being a time to really tune into yourself because it is a time where we are so externally focused, right? In many cases, there's just so much turmoil that's happening during this time because there's so much change. We might be caring for, and depending on where we are, like where we are on the spectrum, but we may be caring for young children. We may be transitioning older children from home to school to whatever their next chapter is. We're often caring for aging parents. We are at, peak places in our career where there's lots of responsibility. We have all of the second shift, all of the things that we do when we come into the home. So we are so focused on everything outside of ourselves that we often, and I will be very honest and say that I absolutely do this. I put my own stuff at the, like I have since the fall when I saw the call for self-screening for a mammogram, I have known I should go and do that and I have yet to do it. But after our conversation today, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call and I'm going to book my mammogram.
Wonderful. So tell me how to reach women in their 40s with this message is continually say, you're important, book time for yourself. It only takes a few minutes, do this. How do we get women to pick up the phone? So few women, in those provinces where they've been able to pick up the phone for 30 years, only 25% of women are going. How do we dispel the misinformation, get accurate information out there, get information to doctors because they are a stumbling block?
Yes.
How do we get women to go? Is what we are struggling with.
Yeah. And I struggle with it in the menopause world, right? Like, how do we support women to take care of their health, to talk about menopause hormone therapy, to talk about how we have to take care of our bodies during this transition? part of it absolutely is these conversations and getting information into the hands of women. And in real honesty, one of the issues is that women also don't feel like they have the time. Like it's a luxury to stop and listen to a podcast, or it's a luxury to go and get these tests because they just don't have the time. And one of the other things that's really been rolling around in my brain a lot lately is we have lost community, and especially intergenerational community, where women would come together and talk about, like, these are all the things that happen over the stages, and this is what you need to do. And I will support you, right? So if it's a woman who is in her earlier years who doesn't have the same kind of responsibilities at that point, I'll hang out with your kids so you can go and do the test. Or with old women in older generations, I'll come and make a meal. I'll come and do those things. We have lost that community. And so one of the things I really wonder about, and maybe we can partner at some point, is how do we start creating these communities where digitally we can share information, but in person, where we come together so we can actually support each other in the practical things that need to happen so we can do the things that continue to care for ourselves.
Yeah. No, it is extremely difficult. And I think that's an excellent point about the community. Yeah. How do you take that time? How do you take it off work? How do you take it? We are a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 society. I mean,
Mhm.
we need these mammogram clinics to be open on weekends and evenings,
Yes,
right? Or we need employers to, perhaps build in, a day where you can go get your medical tests done. Place that emphasis on health. I mean, everybody wins when we're healthy.
absolutely.
So,
And I
yeah,
think
it's a whole change in mindset.
it is a whole change in mindset. And I think that part that you just mentioned, right? It's policy changes that don't sound like a big deal, but absolutely are. So, speaking, I was an educator for 20 years. And in the school board that I worked in, if you had an appointment during a school day, there was reams of documentation that you needed to have to justify why you were having this appointment and needed to take some time off from school. That is a massive deterrent because the amount of time, and when you like,
Yes.
educators are like, the majority are women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. So even if we are working with teaching federations around what to include in their collective bargaining, same with nursing, right? Really targeting those professions that are really heavy in the demographic and getting those pieces in place. Because as an educator, the work it took to create a day plan for a supply teacher to come in, going and having the appointment, and then having to collect all of the documentation necessary, it made it an immediate, I am not doing that.
Right. Right. You're right. It has to be working with the federations and the collective bargaining. And yeah, it is
Yeah.
something that needs to be tackled.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that there were some provinces where the access is a little bit easier. So, what are those provinces, and what are the supports that we need to advocate for in the provinces that don't have that?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we are living in a country that, espouses universal health care. There's no such thing. Where you live, I hate to say this, but where you live makes a difference on whether or not breast cancer will be found early. And I don't think it's just breast cancer. I think it's going to be cervical cancer too. Certain provinces are rolling out HPV self-testing kits. There are, certain provinces have lung cancer screening now.
Mm.
There are major differences across the country. So when it comes to breast cancer screening, only a few provinces will you be able to readily access additional screening for dense breast. That would be BC, Ontario, Alberta, Northwest Territories. And when it comes to the 40s, right now we have self-referral in 6 jurisdictions. We will have it in more. They are coming on board. Some of them are coming slowly, like Saskatchewan, Manitoba will not be all the way there phased in approach till 2026. But right now, if you live in Ontario or New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, PEI, Yukon, BC, you can pick up that phone and book your own mammogram at 40. In Alberta and Northwest Territories, right now it's 45. Continue to advocate. We need women's voices. We need women to help with the advocacy. We are a small volunteer group and we have wonderful advocates and wonderful physicians we work with, but we need many more voices because we need women to go see their MLAs, MPPs, MHAs, whatever they're called in their province, and demand that they have the same chance to find breast cancer early as women in other provinces. So for a place like Manitoba, where you have to wait till 2026 when you're 40, they'll do 45 in 2025, and then you have to wait another 2 years, whereas women in Ontario are going now. It's not right. So it's another hurdle to get women. You're saying women don't have time to go for a test. Well, try and get women to go speak to their political representative. That's another, without the voices, it's very difficult to get change. So people will complain that they can't get an ultrasound in their province, but they are not necessarily willing to go fight for that. And so mobilizing women to take action, because it doesn't take a lot of voices to get change. We haven't had a lot of people in each province, but we have been able to get change. We have been able to get density notification. We have been able to get screening at 40, but now we need to get additional screening for women with dense breasts. And we need 6 provinces, women over 74 need to be able to self-refer. Again, that's an issue. So we need more women, we need to
Yeah,
mobilize. And it's difficult to mobilize. In Nova Scotia, we recently lost one of our advocates, and that spurred, we have had quite a bit of media attention there. That has spurred education and women getting angry and more mobilization, but still we need more, right?
absolutely.
We need to make sure every political representative is aware of the issue, because once they hear that women are suffering and dying and needless later stage cancer diagnosis, everyone has to agree that this is a no-brainer, this is unacceptable. Plus we can now prove to them that there is cost savings. Before, we never had the cost argument. It was always, no one talked about money, but money was always the reason why we were denying women. But now we can save huge money by finding cancer early, because we have so many advancements in treatment. Women, thankfully, are living much longer with breast cancer, and it's costing so much money. A stage 4 patient treatment can be $500,000 for one person. But if you find cancer at stage 1, it's 39,000, the average cost. So would a province be better off paying 39,000 or $500,000? So it's like a no-brainer. Offer the ability to find cancer early. This is what this is all about, early detection. And so too much inequality across the country. And
And
that's, something provinces don't like to lag behind, but there's resource issues. So it's not like all of them are intentionally lagging behind. We have to understand capacity issues. There's a worldwide shortage of ultrasound technologists, and we had a COVID backlog, we have a radiologist shortage. So there are constraints on the system, but we have to keep pushing. We have to keep demanding. Even if your province doesn't offer additional screening, make sure your doctor sends in that requisition. It's going to get rejected. Make sure the province sees there's another request. Because if we don't ask, if we just lie down and accept, being lambs to the slaughter, nothing is going to change. So we have to keep demanding and insist, persist, keep asking. And that's another issue. Are women comfortable insisting and persisting with their healthcare provider? You're being told, oh, you don't need to get a mammogram till 50. Would you be comfortable pushing back saying, hey, I know 17% of breast cancer happens in the 40. Hey, I know these cancers are more aggressive. Hey, I know it's my choice to go. That's what the task force says. It's my choice. Would you be comfortable in pushing back? Most women are not comfortable. There's this power imbalance. We take our doctor's word as gospel. They are God. We're not going to push back. But there are many situations we have to push back. And that's what this is about. It's about early detection, but it's about self-advocacy. And that's the goal of our organization, is to try and give women the education they need so they have the confidence to speak up. We have conversation tips on our website. We have a self-advocacy guide. We need you confident. We need you demanded, because I can tell you, if you don't ask, you won't get. And we're not there to ask for you. It really is in your hands. And
Yeah,
it's the same with menopause, perimenopause, all the things you need, being dismissed. If you don't speak up for yourself, you won't get what you need.
no. And that's what I found is the biggest difference maker. So I was really glad to hear about all of those resources that are on your website, because when women have the information that they can take with them and say, I have evidence as to why what you're telling me is inaccurate, can we please talk about it? That is a game changer for people, so that they don't feel like they're just going in and being difficult, right? They can actually back it up with something. So 3 things I want to leave the audience with. So 1, book your freaking mammograms. Just go and do it.
Yes. And if for Ontario, there's a website where you can see who's got the shortest wait times.
Oh, amazing. So I will make sure that all of those resources are listed in the show notes of this episode. So for those of you who are listening, make sure for this episode in particular, you go down into the show notes, find all the resources that are there. We'll make it as easy as possible. So get your mammograms, get educated. And then what is the number one thing someone could do to advocate for change?
They have to speak to their political representative. We need the more voices we have, the stronger we'll be, the better chance we'll have for change. They need to join us, join our group, join our advocacy. It doesn't take a lot. We have all the resources. We have the letter for the political representative to get a meeting, or if you just want to send a letter, we have meeting guide notes. We can join the meeting. We can help do all the talking. Just be willing to speak up for change. It's time.
It is time, and it is long past time. Jennie, thank you so much. This is such a powerful episode. And for everyone who's listening, I hope you feel empowered. I hope you feel like you can take all of this information and start reclaiming power over your own healthcare. Trust yourself. Trust yourself in the knowledge that you have and in what your body is telling you, and trust yourself that you absolutely can advocate for what is best for you. Jennie, again, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for being part of the Transforming 45 community. Your support means the world to us. Stay tuned for more juicy episodes, and remember to keep showing up to your life with the love and magic you deserve. Until next time.